Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Study English with Frank. And today we're going to continue our series of learning vocabulary for your IELTS exam. And today we're looking at terms that are used in culture and social issues. And it's very likely that a number of the questions on your exam will use vocabulary words related to these kinds of issues. And so it's good to learn. And by the way, if you are a regular student here, please let me know in the comments below if this type of vocabulary lesson is of interest to you, and we'll continue. I'm not sure how many of you out there are going for your IELTS exam, so give me some feedback on that and let me know if these lessons are of interest and value to you. All right, let's begin. The first word that we're going to learn is culture. 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 Culture is traditions, beliefs, and customs of a group of people. You have many customs in your culture, I'm sure, and that's what that means in English. Here are some examples. Different countries have diverse cultures or different cultures. Music is a vital part of our culture. They embraced the local culture during their trip. Stereotype. 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 A stereotype is a general idea that people have about what something or someone is like, which may not be true and usually isn't. Here are some examples. Stereotypes can lead to misunderstandings. Not every teenager fits the rebellious stereotype. You know how in many cultures, teenagers have a reputation of rebelling against their parents. And so people, especially in Western cultures, have this stereotype of teenagers. But not all teenagers fit this rebellious stereotype. Movies often perpetuate or continue this idea of cultural stereotypes. Discrimination. 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 Discrimination is treating someone unfairly because of their race, gender, or other personal features. Someone's maybe disabled. And so people have a certain discrimination towards people that aren't like them. It's very common. People discriminate. Here are some examples. Age discrimination is a big problem in some industries. In some industries, when a person gets to be a certain age, they are often let go or fired because it is generally believed that a person of a younger age will do better. And this is a kind of discrimination. It's called ageism. Age discrimination is a big problem in some industries. She faced discrimination because of her religion. Have you ever experienced this, where somebody discriminates against you because of your beliefs, because of your religion? Well, it happens. That's discrimination. Discrimination goes against the principles of equality. The United Nations has declared that everybody on earth should be treated equally, and everybody should be given the same opportunities. and that's equality. And when there's discrimination, that kind of goes against this principle of how everyone on earth is equal. Multiculturalism. 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 I know that's a big word, but the meaning is easy. Multiculturalism is where different cultures live together and respect each other in one society. Here are some examples. Canada is known for its multiculturalism. And that's very true. That's a very true statement. Canada has had so many people immigrate over the last 50 years that when you walk down the street here in Canada, especially in the big cities in Toronto, you will meet people from all over the world, from different countries, different cultures. Canada is known for its multiculturalism. Schools are teaching the value of multiculturalism. Multiculturalism can enrich a society. And we certainly have found that to be true in Canada. Having all of these people with their backgrounds and their skills and talents migrate to Canada has really enriched our society. Tradition. 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 Tradition is a long-standing custom or belief. Every culture has their own traditions. Can you think of some traditions in your culture? Let me know in the comments below, what is a big tradition in your culture? Here are some examples of how you could use tradition in a sentence. It's a family tradition to gather together every Christmas. Now, I know that not every country celebrates Christmas, but you probably have a festival that is big in your country where families get together. My wife is from Vietnam, and there the big gathering of families happens during what they call Tet, which is the Lunar New Year in Vietnam. It's a big tradition for families to come together at Tet in Vietnam. Here's another way that you could use this word in a sentence. Some traditions have been passed down for centuries. And so tradition is strong in a culture, and the parents pass it down to their children, and the children pass it down to their children, and it's just been passed down for centuries. They introduced me to their local traditions. Migration. Migration. Migration is the movement of people from one place to another. Here are some examples. And it's not just people. Here's an example of birds. Many birds undergo migration during the winter. You might not notice it in your country, but where we are in Canada, when it's winter, starting around November or December, it gets very cold and it's a lot of snow on the ground, and the birds have a hard time finding food to eat. And so many of them will migrate south to, say, Florida in the United States, or even further during the winter. They migrate. They fly that far away. They migrate. Economic reasons often drive migration. And that is true. One of the big reasons why people leave their home country and move to another country is they hope that when they arrive in the new country, they will have better economic opportunities. And so that's why many people leave. The government is discussing migration policies, and this is very true. In the United States, you've probably seen on the news a lot of people talking about how they want to have new and different and better migration policies. Minority. 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 A minority is a smaller group within a larger group, especially one that is treated differently or perhaps even badly with some discrimination. I know I have traveled to many countries where there might be ethnic minorities, small groups of people living in the hills of that country. Hill tribes, we used to call them. Now we just call them ethnic minorities. And they often are treated badly by the main population of a country. They might be treated with discrimination, like we've learned, and not have the same opportunities as the others. Or some business people might even exploit the people and give them bad business opportunities that cause them to go into debt. And so these things happen with minorities in a country. Here are some examples of how a minority could be used in a sentence. He belongs to an ethnic minority. Women in some fields are still a minority. The rights of minorities must be protected. Globalization. 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 Have you heard of this word? It's an important word to learn. You'll hear of it a lot on the news and even in history books. There's been a real movement towards globalization in the last 40 or 50 years. And so it is a concept, it is a term that is talked about a lot. What does it mean? Globalization. Well, globalization is the process by which businesses, ideas, and cultures spread around the world. So, for example, here in Canada, we used to just manufacture most of the things that we purchased and used. But then, about 30 years ago, we started buying more of our goods from other countries like China and the United States and Mexico. And so businesses started opening up factories in some of these countries. The Apple company is a good example. They open up factories in China. Well, that's globalization. They've moved their manufacturing mostly overseas to other countries where labor is cheaper. That's globalization. Globalization has both pros and cons. Do you know what pros and cons are? Pros and cons is a way of saying there are some things about globalization that are very good and positive, and there are some things, cons, that are not very good. And so they have both pros and cons. The internet has accelerated globalization. It's made globalization spread out faster. And so it's accelerated globalization. Many foods we eat are a result of globalization. That's very true here in Canada. When I was a boy, we didn't have a lot of food that was produced from other countries. We just ate what we were able to grow here. But today, when we go to the supermarket, we have the opportunity to buy food from probably 100 different countries are there right in our supermarket. They've shipped it in from all over the world. And that's a good example of globalization. Gender. 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 Gender is the social distinction between male and female. Here are some examples. Gender roles have evolved over the years. Have you seen this in your culture, where gender roles have changed over time? Do you know what I mean by gender roles? Well, that's the idea of how some cultures believe that it is the woman's job to do all of the housework and the cooking and the cleaning. And it's the man's job to go out and make money, to buy the groceries. Well, in many countries, those very strict ideas of roles that men do and roles that women do are changing and blending, so that these days in many countries, men will help their wives with the cleaning and the cooking and the housework. Some cultures have non-binary gender concepts. Non-binary gender concepts. I don't know if this has become a thing in your country, but in Canada and the United States and Europe, mostly Western countries, I guess, people who are not sure whether they're mentally or emotionally female or male will identify as non-binary. And it's interesting how attitudes on this have changed over the years, and how here in Canada we used to discriminate. It's a word we've learned, right? Discriminate against people who were not sure about what gender they were. But these days the attitudes have changed, and here in Canada, men can marry men and women can marry women, and it's considered just as much of a marriage as when a man and a woman marry. So I'd be curious to know what it's like in your country. Let me know. Is gay marriage a thing in your country? Gender equality is essential for development. Gender equality. Do you know what I mean by gender equality? Well, gender equality is the idea where people consider women to be of the same value in a society as men are. And so they're not discriminated against, they're given the same opportunities to get the same type of education, to have the same job opportunities, and to be treated with the same respect as men in a society. And it really is true to say that it is essential for the development of a country, for a country to grow and keep up with the rest of the world. Because what happens in those countries that don't have gender equality is they really fall behind the rest of the world very quickly, because they're not taking advantage of half of the population abilities. They're only employing half of the people in their country in their workforce. And so they have a lot more potential that they could tap into if they would only have gender equality and allow the women to work outside the home as well. And so that's gender equality, treating women with the same respect and value as men. And our last vocabulary word for this lesson, inequality. 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 Inequality is an unfair difference between groups of people. Here are some examples. Economic inequality is increasing in many countries. Economic inequality. What that means is basically the gap between the rich and the poor is getting bigger and bigger. That's economic inequality. Have you ever heard the saying? We have a saying in English, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Well, that's economic inequality, the gap between the rich and the poor. Here's another example. They are fighting against racial inequality. Have you ever experienced this in your life where you are discriminated against because of your race? Race is kind of a division that people have made that's artificial. It's not real. I like to say everybody is of the same race, the human race, right? We're all created equal, and all should have the same value and be treated with the same opportunities and respect. And if we were, then we would be being treated equally. But inequality kind of reverses the meaning of equality. It's the opposite of equal is unequal, or in this case, inequality. It kind of reverses the meaning of equality. Education can help reduce inequality. And so those are 10 words that are going to show up probably on your exam, and I hope that we were able to help you understand these words today in this lesson. But I think that does it for today. Hope you've enjoyed it, and if so, be sure and give it a like. And if you haven't already done so, I invite you to subscribe, and that way YouTube will let you know when we release the next lesson. And if you know of some others who are also wanting to prepare for this exam, be sure and let them know about this channel and how they can learn the vocabulary words on YouTube at Study English with Frank. So long for today.